What if everything women say has a hidden psychological meaning you were never meant to understand? Welcome back to Psych Seeker. Before we explore this crucial topic, please subscribe and like this video because what I'm about to reveal will permanently alter how you perceive female communication and relationships. If you remain unaware, you'll continue making the same errors repeatedly, questioning why things never progress as expected. Let's begin with something that consistently confuses most men: the psychological statements women make without conscious deception. Not the dramatic falsehoods from entertainment media, but subtle, nearly invisible ones that influence emotions and keep you uncertain, unsure whether you're valued or merely accommodated. The reality is, women possess complex psychology, and society has conditioned men to prioritize literal honesty, while women sometimes communicate through layered meanings, concealing genuine intentions beneath social grace, attraction, or self-doubt. If you cannot see beyond the surface language, you will consistently misinterpret the signals, and that miscomprehension is what erodes men's confidence and personal agency. The first psychological statement you encounter most frequently: "I'm okay." Every man considers it harmless. Every man believes he can disregard it. But listen carefully, when a woman states "I'm okay," it almost never signifies actual okayness. It's an assessment, a subtle method to observe whether you detect her discomfort, whether you can interpret the invisible cues, whether you care sufficiently to investigate further. Most men respond by providing distance, by accepting the surface presentation, and that's precisely what she anticipates. But what she genuinely desires is someone who can manage the unexpressed, someone who reads between statements and acts with understanding. If you ignore it, you're conditioning her to believe you lack depth or emotional availability. Then there's the statement disguised as a compliment: "You're very emotional." Men hear this and feel criticized, but emotional awareness isn't the problem. The actual message is, "I'm evaluating your emotional boundaries. Can you handle me without compromising yourself?" Women observe your reactions. Do you withdraw? Do you debate? Or do you recognize that emotional perception constitutes part of emotional intelligence and it represents your advantage, not a disadvantage? Your response reveals your self-command level, your capacity for leadership, and your potential for attraction. By comprehending these initial psychological statements, you start recognizing a pattern, a blueprint of female communication that most men never acquire. Most men proceed blindly, accepting everything at superficial value. But the truth is, what women express often serves as concealment for what they experience, what they desire, or what they dread. And that, my friend, is where influence transfers. Once you can identify it, once you can interpret it accurately, you begin directing your interactions instead of being directed. Now let's discuss a statement that nearly every man misinterprets: "I only want friendship." When a woman says this, your instinct might be to relax, to soften, to demonstrate your trustworthiness. But here's the reality she rarely voices aloud: "I want to see if you can handle potential rejection while maintaining interest. I want to measure your worth before determining if you merit my attention." Friendship, in numerous instances, doesn't represent neutrality. It constitutes an evaluation arena. Every humorous remark she makes, every look she gives, every subtle contact or absence thereof represents a signal. If you fail to interpret these signs, you're conditioning her to perceive you as unnoticeable, interchangeable, and predictable. Another statement men hear regularly is, "Appearance doesn't matter to me." Consider how many men have invested years attempting to prove themselves, trying to outmaneuver the system, believing personality alone will unlock female desire. Here's the challenging reality. While personality is important, attraction begins with biology. What she says frequently masks what she truly values: assurance, leadership, social standing, and emotional steadiness. When a woman claims appearance lacks significance, she's often observing your presentation, your energy, and how you carry yourself. She's determining whether you possess self-respect, presence, and the capacity to stimulate desire beyond mere language. Misinterpreting this can leave you confused, frustrated, and underappreciated, thinking your charm is enough on its own, when actually your aura represents the currency she responds to. Then there's the most hazardous statement for men pursuing committed relationships: "I desire someone who provokes me." Men hear this, and assume she wants excitement, conflict, perhaps disagreement. But in reality, she's evaluating resilience and guidance capability. Women feel drawn to men who can establish stability while remaining somewhat unpredictable in controlled manners, a contradiction designed to observe who can navigate their emotional fluctuations without being overwhelmed. If you cannot navigate this correctly, you will either frighten her away through weakness or bore her through excessive compliance. Understanding these psychological statements involves developing an emotional perception of the interpretation between language and actions. It's about recognizing the distinction between surface-level declarations and the actual subtext, which consistently reveals desire, fear, or intention. Men who fail here don't merely lose relationships, they lose respect, attraction, and most significantly, their own self-assurance. Here's the insight nobody shares with you. Women don't merely make these statements for self-protection. They communicate this way to measure, to observe, to determine value. And once you start recognizing the patterns clearly, once you comprehend the genuine motivations behind her words, you acquire an influence most men never realize exists. Influence to attract, influence to affect, influence to never again be surprised by what remains unspoken. Here's a statement that impacts more profoundly than most men recognize. I'm different from other women. Every man wants to believe he's involved with someone distinctive, someone exceptional, someone immune to psychological dynamics. But this declaration is rarely literal. It represents an assessment of your awareness. When she states, I'm different from other women, what she's actually communicating is, notice my distinctions, observe the patterns I'm testing, and demonstrate that you can handle me without failing where others have. It's a subtle invitation to observe, to analyze, and if you misinterpret it, to fall into the trap of overvaluing her uniqueness while neglecting your own worth. Men who become lost here develop dependency on validation instead of building attraction. Another statement that endlessly perplexes men is, I simply require distance. When you hear this, the natural response is anxiety. But the truth beneath the language is rarely about actual distance. It concerns control. She's observing your emotional stability. Can you respect boundaries without withdrawing your value? Can you provide her the perception of freedom while maintaining magnetic presence? Distance is rarely neutral. It represents a challenge, a psychological examination, and the men who fail respond with nervousness, possessiveness, or overcompensation, indicating they are easily influenced. The men who succeed comprehend the concealed purpose. She's measuring patience, confidence, and the capacity to make her desire to return, not from obligation, but desire. Then there's a statement wrapped in emotional exposure. I'm not prepared for commitment. Men hear this and assume, she's unavailable, I should disengage. But listen attentively. Frequently, this declaration doesn't concern readiness whatsoever. It concerns evaluating timing, emotional investment, and whether you can sustain attraction without desperation. She's observing how you manage delay, frustration, and challenge. Can you remain composed, maintain your life, and subtly reinforce your value? Or do you collapse, plead, and confirm what she feared about men generally? Understanding this subtle assessment separates men who are desirable from men who are disposable. And then comes the classic, I simply enjoy casual time together. Ordinary language, yet loaded with hidden significance. She's evaluating chemistry, your energy, your leadership, and your capacity to engage and guide without losing composure. Every laugh, every glance, every reaction you display gets recorded, assessed, and compared against what she wants, what she fears, and what she tolerates. Misinterpreting this represents the fastest route to friendship categorization, disappearance, or manipulation into emotional depletion. Here's the reality men must confront. Women rarely make these statements to harm you. They communicate this way to observe, to filter, and to measure value. Every error you commit teaches her less about who you are and more about what she can influence. The men who master this aren't merely attractive. They become untouchable in confidence, influence, and desire. Let's reveal another statement that's almost invisible to most men. I don't consider him in that manner. Superficially, it sounds harmless, even casual. But the genuine message proves far more revealing. Women employ these words to gauge your emotional response. Are you jealous, insecure, or indifferent? Every subtle reaction informs her exactly how much value you assign to yourself and your time. The truth is, she isn't concerned about him at all. She's measuring your energy, your presence, and your capacity to maintain attraction, even when her mind experiments with hypothetical situations. If you react weakly, if your confidence deteriorates, you've just educated her that desire can be influenced easily. If you respond with calm power, she starts associating you with stability, strength, and control, the invisible forces that draw her in more than any compliment ever could. Another statement that emotionally devastates men is, "I'm not seeking anything serious." You might believe you can relax, take it easy, and await her coming around. Incorrect. What she's actually signaling is, "I'm observing how you respond to temporary uncertainty. Can you remain confident, ambitious, and self-assured while I test your patience?" Men often interpret this as disinterest and pursue more intensely. But the genuine test is subtle, your capacity to handle ambiguity without losing self-respect. Women feel drawn to men who thrive under these conditions, not men who complain, pressure, or beg. This represents a filter disguised as casual language. Then there's the seemingly innocent line, "I simply want someone who comprehends me." Every man hears this and rushes to empathy, believing that listening more, caring more, or sacrificing more will win her over. But what she genuinely means is, "I want someone who knows when to lead, when to guide, and when to create safety while remaining stimulating. I don't want someone who simply agrees. I want someone who commands presence, maintains boundaries, and ignites desire." Misunderstanding this proves fatal. Men who over-accommodate lose attraction. Men who balance attention with power gain it effortlessly. Even words like, "I don't require anyone," contain layers. On one level, it's independence. On another, it's a test of your value. Can you maintain intrigue without pushing, without panicking? Can you make her feel desire for your presence rather than obligation? Men fail here constantly because they assume honesty is literal, forgetting that attraction thrives in subtle tension, not transparency. The truth proves challenging, yet empowering. Women make these statements less to deceive and more to measure, to filter, and to observe. Every error you commit gets recorded, every reaction analyzed, and every moment of hesitation noted. When you understand this, when you begin interpreting words as signals rather than absolutes, you cease being influenced and you start controlling the emotional rhythm of every interaction. That represents where power, attraction, and respect become truly established. Now let's reveal the statement that emotionally devastates men more than any other. "I simply want enjoyment." Most men hear this and assume it's harmless, a casual declaration about dating, spontaneity, or freedom. But listen carefully. What she's actually testing is your reaction to ambiguity, your capacity to remain confident under uncertainty, and your ability to create desire without appearing needy. Enjoyment serves as concealment for control, a filter for value. If you panic, pursue, or attempt to define the relationship prematurely, you signal weakness. If you maintain composure, humor, and self-possession, you become magnetic. This doesn't concern the language, it concerns the energy behind it, and most men completely miss it. Then comes the statement wrapped in loyalty. "I'm not interested in anyone else." The instinct is to relax, to lower your guard, and to feel secure. But in truth, she's not always discussing others. She's discussing testing your confidence, your boundaries, and your capacity to stay appealing. She wants to see if you believe in yourself sufficiently to maintain value and presence, even facing uncertainty. A man who doubts himself here immediately becomes less desirable. A man who maintains his energy and standards gains an invisible advantage. Attraction rarely builds on language. It builds on the interplay of presence, challenge, and subtle authority. Another classic statement is, "I love you," expressed too soon or too casually. Many men celebrate, believing this represents validation, proof of affection. But psychologically, women sometimes employ premature declarations of love to measure response. Can you handle intense emotions without losing control? Will you reciprocate instantly, overinvest, or do you remain steady and measured? The words constitute a psychological experiment, and your response determines how she values you long-term. Respond too weakly, she doubts. Respond too eagerly, and she loses attraction. Respond with balance, and she begins perceiving you as a rare and stable influence in her life. Even "I simply want honesty" can represent a trap. Men assume transparency suffices, but she's actually observing your capacity to navigate delicate emotional terrain with intelligence. She wants insight, awareness, and subtle leadership, not raw confession. Honesty without emotional intelligence proves meaningless. Your interpretation and delivery build trust and desire simultaneously. Here's the direct truth. Women make these statements less to deceive you and more to measure you. Every word, every hesitation, every casual declaration forms part of a system, an emotional framework designed to filter men based on confidence, awareness, and self-mastery. The men who fail become frustrated, manipulated, and undervalued. The men who master this gain respect, attraction, and unshakable influence. Understanding this doesn't represent an option. It proves essential if you want to navigate female psychology without losing yourself in the process. Finally, let's reveal the statement that underlies them all. I'm being completely truthful with you. Every word a woman expresses gets filtered through her desire, fear, and strategy. The problem is, most men accept these declarations at surface value, assuming that spoken language equals reality. But the truth proves far more complex. Women communicate through layers, testing, observing, and measuring your emotional intelligence, confidence, and composure with every phrase. If you respond blindly, you become led. If you respond wisely, you lead. This represents where power, attraction, and respect converge. Let's simplify it. Every psychological statement you've encountered, every declaration that confused or frustrated you, represents a psychological test disguised as conversation. I'm okay with assessing your observation. I only want a friendship that evaluates your patience and value. I'm not prepared for commitment measures emotional control. Each is designed to filter men based on their capacity to maintain presence under uncertainty, to demonstrate confidence, and to act with invisible authority. Once you recognize the patterns, you begin comprehending the hidden language of desire. Here's the insight most men never grasp. Women aren't malicious for expressing these things. They become wired to test, filter, and protect themselves. But the men who fall into confusion or overreaction surrender their power. The men who rise above, who perceive words as signals rather than absolutes, become irresistible. It doesn't concern manipulation, it concerns mastery, emotional mastery, psychological awareness, and self-assured presence represent your keys. Once you develop them, you no longer pursue, you attract. You no longer guess, you interpret. You no longer react, you lead. And here's the most critical truth. Desire thrives in tension, not comfort. Women want a man who proves available yet unshakable, caring yet commanding, predictable in integrity yet unpredictable in energy. When you comprehend the psychological statements, you comprehend the tests. When you comprehend the tests, you comprehend the pathway to respect, desire, and long-term influence. You cease being influenced and start establishing the rhythm of every interaction. So remember this, words rarely prove literal. Every time "I'm okay, I simply want enjoyment, and I'm not prepared" represents a signal, a doorway to attraction, or a trap for weakness. The choice belongs to you. Respond with awareness, composure, and invisible authority, and you will never again be surprised by what remains unexpressed. This represents the psychology women aren't sharing with you, the truths you were never supposed to perceive. Master them and you master the dynamic. If this expanded your understanding of female communication, support this channel, like this video, and subscribe to Psych Seeker for more psychological insights you won't find elsewhere. Her words are psychological tests disguised as conversation. What she says conceals what she truly measures.